Hello, everyone. My name is Heather Best, and I have the great privilege of being your MC and moderator for the webinar this afternoon, evening. Welcome. I just wanted to cue you to the fact that this is being interpreted into French, and there's an interpretation icon at the bottom of your screen. In addition, we'd like to welcome, here's a slide to show you where that is. So the purpose of this webinar this evening is really to give you some tools and some resources that as parents and families and patients as well, if some of you are listening, that you can draw from for that very exciting back to school time that can be a little bit anxiety producing. We really want to support our kids and families in this big endeavor, which is back to school. There will be lots of time for questions. I would also just like to indicate that please put your questions in the question and answer box rather than the chat. At the bottom of the screen, you'll see that question and answer icon as well. We'd love to welcome people from many sites throughout both Canada and the States, and some from Europe as well. Really excited to have such a diverse audience this evening, and really look forward to some of the things that you may bring in your questions as well. So one of the big things that is exciting for us to introduce is this worksheet. It's actually an action plan that's been designed to help really categorize the different groups of challenges, as well as tools that students really need, especially if they are living with a chronic illness as they approach their back to school plan. So I just would ask you to have a look at this. On the left of your screen, there are 4 boxes there. One is titled Physical Tangible Supports you or your child might need at school. So that might be some really practical suggestions or things that you might want to jot down in that box. Another is what social or emotional supports you may find that your child needs, and also that you may need as to access as well, advocate on behalf of your child. What are some of the learning and educational supports that may be available through your school? And this can be a bit of a tricky situation because we do have people from many different parts of a few different countries who are calling into this webinar. So your situation may be different depending on where you are. So we would really encourage you to go to your healthcare professional or your educational supports, your teachers, your principals and counselors. Also, what is it that you and your child need to communicate to your educators and your coaches, the administrations of the school as well, in terms of navigating those different variances in what your child's needs are during flares, during different medication switches, those sorts of things. And then we've given you this chart that you can kind of collate, what supports you need, who you should be communicating with, and then what actions are there for you to take as well. So as I mentioned before, please, if you have a question, there is a question and answer button just at the bottom of your screen there. Please do put your questions there. We will have quite a long session at the end of the webinar this evening where we will go through some of those questions. We'll attempt to answer all of them and pull in some of the panelists to answer specifics to their area of expertise. If we don't get to your question, don't worry. Certainly there's an opportunity for those questions to be collated at the end, and some of the answers will be available either through email or on our Facebook page where you can continue that conversation there. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our speakers. This is a really excellent, very experienced threesome here that we get to hear from tonight. Colleen Castonguay is a parent, speaker, and elementary school principal from the Lower Mainland. She and her husband, Lance, and their 2 children, Cole and Caden, live in the Lower Mainland, as I mentioned. Colleen is the principal of an elementary school. Caden was diagnosed with JIA when she was 3 years old. They have attended annual Cassie and Friends family days regularly. Caden, who is now almost 16 years old, has developed some creative coping strategies over the years. She has found a variety of ways to manage difficult times, and she has become more independent through treatment. The Castonguays are an active family, spending as much time as possible outdoors, biking, paddling, as well as with their dog. I'd like to introduce also Sarah James, who is an occupational therapist at BC Children's Hospital. She completed her PhD in 2014 at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, Australia, and moved to Canada in 2017, where she began working at BC Children's Hospital. She has worked across a range of research and clinical areas and is passionate about supporting children and their families to work towards their individual goals. And also we have Joanne Marcuz. She's a pediatric physiotherapist at SickKids in Toronto. And she's been a registered physiotherapist since 2003 and has been working with rheumatology division at SickKids since 2005. She enjoys working as part of an interdisciplinary team in striving to help patients achieve their optimal state of well-being and participation in the activities they love. She complements her work at SickKids with teaching at the University of Toronto in the Department of Physical Therapy and has been fortunate to be involved in many research projects. When she's not at work, Joanne adores spending time with her family. A very brief mention about myself. I too am an occupational therapist who worked in with patients who have rheumatic disease over many different ages for many years. And part of my time was spent also at BC Children's Hospital in the pediatric rheumatology program there. So I would like to take this time to introduce Colleen specifically in her piece. Hi, Colleen. I will hand it over to you.
Thank you, Heather. I appreciate that. It is a real honor to be asked to come and speak, just to share our journey, sort of navigating school. You know, I really appreciate, we have leaned on Cassie and friends many times and have found great just comfort in, I guess, the amount of support that we've received from them. So just to say thank you before we get started. I'll share my screen and hopefully it all works the way we planned. All right, so if you can see my screen, I think you can. Just my opening picture is kind of a real reflection of our family. My daughter, Kaden, who she's at the helm there with the oars in her hand. It's kind of is indicative of who she is. She has a real independent streak. She likes to have that sense of control. And after about 15 days coming down the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon, she decided she was going to be the head oars person. So yeah, lots of fun there. What I want to do is just share our journey in sort of 3 main snippets. I've divided up the time that we've had, basically kind of kindergarten, elementary, middle school, and then secondary school for Kaden, and kind of how things have changed over the time, what was important for her support in those time periods. And I'm going to use the planning sheets, the back to school action plan, to kind of go through what it was that we had to focus on at those time periods. So to start with, when she was first diagnosed, she was in preschool, and she used to call it her hurt knee when we first sort of started to have to manage, you know, figuring out what was happening for her. And lots of times she was unable to kind of walk or bend her knee until midday. And you know, preschool, of course, they were great at accommodating that. There was very comfortable spaces, lots of options for her to choose from in those spaces. And then, you know, she had her, her knee had, I can't remember what they did, the steroids in her knee, and her knee was, you know, back to being working for her, and she was fine. And then we had to move into the uveitis with her medication. So some of the things that happened for her when she sort of had sore knees or she didn't feel well as a youngster, she was okay with having to say, I don't feel good, or I need a break, or I'm not going to participate in this. And it didn't really, in terms of moving on to that second square where it says the emotional supports, she just wanted to feel like she belonged, but it wasn't, it didn't take a toll on her, I would say, in elementary school at all. One of the things we had to work with the school to do was just getting access to her at midday to get those drops in. My husband also, he's in education as well. We had to run up from work and quickly run into the school, and the school was very accommodating with giving us access to her, sort of to quickly get that done. So that was great. And then one of the things that I started to do was I would just send an email at the beginning of the year. So I didn't wait until there was something happening for Kaden, or that she had a sore knee, or that she was feeling nauseous and I had to kind of backpedal. I always did sort of a preemptive early September email. Here's what things happened for her, and I feel like that. Um, it just gave everyone a chance to kind of get a heads up and around the situation, and a chance for me to answer questions when there was, because earlier in a school year, um, traditionally there's a parent teacher interview, usually in the fall. And so that email would go out at the very beginning. And then if there were any questions, I could answer them when I actually had face to face meetings. So we moved on from sort of preschool up to grade 5, and then we hit middle school, and that's things changed again, because for Caden, we had to go through a fair bit of tough times for her with her injections. She had a really difficult experience with some of her Humira injections, and she developed a needle phobia. And so there was, um, for her, she had some really tough moments. Not a lot of that sort of trickled to school, but it made her sort of pull in a little bit to be more private, which then that social emotional support became, she did ask that she had more confidentiality. So I had to include in that first email to the teachers, that I still did in September, but I would write that it's that she wants to keep this, and she'll be in charge of who she tells and whether it's said. And so there had to be a little bit more subtlety to their supports. Most of this time, her challenges were around nausea, because she had a weekly injection. And we tried to move it to a weekend. Her Monday morning, sometimes into a Tuesday, it would be a little bit rough for her. She did find that going outside helped her, and we asked that she have that option. Sometimes with you know not feeling well, she actually would have to ask for reduced physical activity or changes to her activity. And everyone was like, had a lot of support with that. That seemed to work fairly well. Our sort of biggest challenges during that time was around that needle phobia. And that was kind of more working from home than it affecting school. Um, we'd still needed allowances for missed class time and instruction. And as an educator, I find, lots of times families would say, well, if they miss school, can you send the stuff home so that they can catch up? And as an educator, I know they're not just missing a piece of paper that they need to pick up. They're actually missing the instruction or the activity that went with the learning. So, those kinds of pieces that actually, if you're not there, you miss it, even if you're taking the sheet, or you have the pages to look at. There was instruction, there was more to it. So, I mean, I worried about that for her. We seemed to manage and get through um, middle school okay. I would say for that, she had alternate activities for PE and stuff, so that worked pretty well. But that academic piece got a little more challenging in secondary. So moving over to secondary school for Caden, um, a whole different set of challenges that came with that too. So she still needed access, when she was feeling nausea. I think her medication increased at some point in high school, and she wasn't well, confessions. Some days she didn't quite get her injection on the weekend, and so it would be like Sunday night rather than Friday night or Saturday night. And that just made for a really bumpy week and missing school. And she was struggling academically through that first entrance, that grade 9 year. So we had some really big bumps along the way there, having to talk to teachers about her not feeling well and having to leave, or trying to manage some question around, is she skipping out, not trying to do the work? Because some days, to be honest, there might have been that as well, because she was finding it quite challenging. So it took a lot of communication. We went to every parent teacher interview. We were regularly emailing, both of us, my husband and I, just to stay really in contact with teachers and keep that relationship with the teachers um, as positive, and as a team, working for her as much as we possibly could. And so major assignments and testing deadlines, when we knew them in advance, it helped Kaden quite a bit, knowing sort of in advance, and even just sort of navigating when making sure that she was on top of taking her folic acid, and making sure that she took her injections on the Friday, and even though it kind of ruins her weekend. And as she became more of a teenager, that became a bit of a push. So those kinds of things that came along the way. And at this point, she's in grade 11 now. This was the first year that I didn't send an email to her teachers. Over the past 12 months, I would say she has, well, I'd say probably this has been coming slowly for 3 or 4 years, but she really wants that independence, um, owning what's happening to her body, and having a hand in how it lays out. And so um, I said to her, I always send an email to your teachers. I said, what do you want to do? And she said, no, I'll talk to them about it myself. And I said, okay, because that's kind of where we're at now. She's going to do the conversation with her teachers, and I am confident that she would do that. So at this point, in terms of social emotional, she does want that confidentiality still. So we're making sure, even with her friends, even with some of her friends, like, there are certain friends that know about it and certain friends that don't. And so that kind of can connect to school as well. One of the other challenges that came up, though, that wasn't unexpected for me, was playing community sports, and sports with the school. She's a very active kid. She loves soccer. She was playing rugby, and it got to the point where her knee had a flare up, and she was trying to play rugby, and it just she couldn't manage both sports at the same time. Her body just wasn't recovering and going enough, and she had sort of felt, being on this rugby team, she really enjoyed that kind of tough, kind of atmosphere. So she never shared with anybody really what was going on. And so when things kind of went sideways and she wasn't able to practice and stuff, she had a hard time navigating that. So just trying to explain without really saying anything, well, I can't today because, my legs are sore, or whatever it was, that it just didn't work for her. She ended up quitting, and that's, reflection and learning for her around, you know what might have worked differently. We all learn, I guess, but that was a tough one for her. So balancing that confidentiality piece sometimes, when, trying to hand off that independence, it's tricky times. I would say we're at a point now where we're feeling really confident in her ability to make really positive decisions for her health. And it's nice to be able to see that for her. She is very able to speak to her teachers. But one of the things that we do at home often before any of those conversations happen is we rehearse. Part of that, I don't know, yeah, if you know my daughter, she talks a lot. So trying to slow her down and be more mindful about what she's saying. So even before a doctor's appointment, so before a conversation with a teacher, so what exactly is it that you're trying to say? Kind of say it back to her and then tease out really the important points that she needs to share and hand that back to her to share with the teacher. So sort of moving along all through our journey of the different sections of school. And again, lots of support from our team at Children's Hospital and Cassie and Friends. But, and finally, we get lots of emotional support in different ways at our house too. So this is Kaden with our dog Nahani, who is also there to help out. So that's us. And I appreciate again, thank you for giving me this opportunity to share.
Thank you so much, Colleen. That's really insightful and really helpful through the different stages of school as well. I apologize. I wanted to mention that the action plan is actually is put into the chat, and so we would encourage you to take a minute, if you haven't already, to download that, so that if you wanted a copy that you could type along with or print it and fill it out as we go, that might be a helpful thing for you to do if you'd like to do that. And now I would like to introduce our next speakers, Sarah James, Occupational Therapist, and Joanne Marcuz, Physiotherapist, as they take us through some more practical tips.
Thank you, Heather. Sorry there for the slight delay. So it is a pleasure for Joanne and I to be invited this evening to provide some tips about school participation from a physio and OT perspective. So this evening, I will start off by covering some considerations when it comes to backpacks, some classroom modifications, potential learning supports and test considerations, and some social and emotional supports. I will then hand over to Joanne, who will discuss pacing, as well as gym and sports participation. And as Heather mentioned, please feel free to add any notes to your school action plan as we go along this evening, and we will have some pauses throughout our presentation for this as well. So it is too common to see students filing into school with backpacks potentially bigger than their back and hunched over in an attempt to manage the weight. Making sure that school backpacks are not too heavy, though, is important for all students and can be especially so for children who may have arthritis or other symptoms that may be aggravated with the additional load. So when it comes to backpack weight, ideally the bag should be no more than about 10 to 20% of the child's body weight. So for a simple example, if say there's a 10-year-old student who weighs around 50 pounds, aiming for between 5 to 10 pounds as a rough benchmark. It can be hard sometimes to think about ways to reduce the weight of these bags. And some tips can be for those students who may have textbooks to use, requesting a second set so that there can be a set left at home to reduce carrying back and forth. Sometimes online texts can be used instead of having a hard copy textbook. Some heavy items can sometimes even be left at school, so things maybe such as water bottles or even musical instruments if they're not needed that particular night for home practice. As well as if school lockers are available, using these to either store some of these heavy items or even to leave the backpack themselves during the day in the locker instead of carrying it around so much during the day. When it comes to choosing backpacks, there is not one particular brand that we will recommend over another, but rather some features to look out for that can maximize comfort and minimize muscle or joint complaints. So as a general rule of thumb, the bag itself shouldn't really be bigger than your child's back as a baseline. We can look for some wide padded straps rather than more narrow straps to help distribute some load across the shoulders. Chest and/or hip straps can also be used to help distribute the weight off the shoulders and onto other areas. We want to then adjust the strap so that the bag is sitting firmly against the back, so sitting just below the shoulders and above the hips and sitting snug there rather than pulling off the back. For some students who may struggle with either picking up the bag or wearing a backpack, some students will prefer to actually use a bag that might be on wheels. Finally then, how we actually pack the bag can make a big difference as well. So heaviest items ideally will be closest to the center of the bag to help with balance. Multiple compartments can really help in terms of ease of access of the bag, especially for students who may have maybe complaints in their wrists or hands. And so actually getting in and out of the school bag might be quite challenging. Knowing where things are or even having things in external pockets can really help. Another thing to look out for if your child or teenager is using a laptop, a bag that actually has a laptop sleeve so they can reduce the extra bulk by having a separate laptop case or even a separate laptop bag that they have to carry as well. A few thoughts now when it comes to potential modifications for the classroom. And it's important to keep in mind that these modifications are unique for each child. And as Colleen took us through, these will vary across the year and also change over time. So throughout the grades, as the school demands change, and then also through periods of disease flares and remission. So some things to keep in mind in terms of classroom setup. The seating position may be variable depending on the child. So for someone who maybe gets quite stiff if they're sitting for a long period of time, potentially sitting near the side of the class or even back of the class might make them feel more comfortable to take movement breaks and feel like they're not disrupting their peers. Whereas potentially if a student has uveitis or eye inflammation, maybe they prefer to sit near the front of the class so they have better access and ease of viewing to the board. For some students who perhaps have difficulty getting on and off the floor or sitting for a long period of time on the floor, having access to a chair to sit on instead of sitting on the floor can be nice. And sometimes doing this alongside a buddy so that they're not feeling singled out or different to their peers. Simple things like using a slant board for handwriting can be helpful in the classroom, especially if the student is having any back or hip complaints. This can help to promote a good posture at the desk. Some use of equipment or technology can also help to make life a little easier at school for some students. So this may be, if possible, access to a computer or laptop so that some work, when possible, may be able to be completed typing rather than handwriting. Specific software may be needed at times, for example, some dictation software, something like Dragon Dictation, or even some of the simple Google or Android dictation apps. Online texts, again, can be helpful for some students. For any students that may be having, again, wrist or hand complaints, then handwriting is painful or takes extra time, sometimes using things such as different pencil grips, built-up handles, or even mechanical pencils can be really helpful. For those students who potentially have wrist arthritis, using the wrist splint or brace can be helpful just to provide some support and help with pain. So I would just touch briefly on managing uveitis or eye inflammation in the classroom, because it can be something that can be challenging for teachers to be aware of and also know how to best support. So students with uveitis may be sometimes bothered by glare. So even having suggestions in place so that the light is coming more from behind the student rather than in front. And maybe they're not sitting right next to a bright window where the sunshine is beaming in can be really helpful. Even strategies such as using colored paper, so a gray or a green, or using computer filters or adjusting the contrast can really help to take away some of that glare. Also considering wearing sunglasses outside, either if it's in PE class or it's recess, especially on the bright sunny days, or potentially if they're out in the snow as well. This can be especially important. Uveitis can fluctuate over time as well. So communicating with the teachers early in the year, which was something that I think Colleen emphasized so well, is really key here so that their expectations can be flexible throughout the year as things may change. Some students may actually have changes in vision due to complications of the uveitis. So things such as increasing the font size on handouts, taking some extra breaks, having added time for exams can be helpful. There may also be times where some modifications with physical activities may be needed. So having these things in place in case they are needed throughout the year can be best set up early in the school year. We'll just take a quick pause now, just if there's anything that you would like to jot down on your action plan, if there's anything that has rung a little bell in terms of either backpacks, some classroom setup, modifications for your child, or anything that you think might be helpful in terms of equipment or technology that you could chat with your school about. And I'll keep moving along, but please keep writing and we'll again have some more time for coming back to that action plan. So moving on now to some learning supports. So students who have juvenile idiopathic arthritis and some other rheumatic diseases may be eligible for a chronic health designation, and then implementation of either an individual education or program plan. And this will vary province to province across Canada and of course in different countries as well. So this is of course something to chat with your school team about, but just some things to bring to mind. So an IEP isn't necessary for every child, and some will prefer actually not to have one. But for some students, it can be helpful to outline and formalize learning goals and then potentially these support strategies. Again, these support strategies can be incorporated within the day-to-day classroom setting without an IEP as well. So this is just something to keep in mind that for some students, it can be something that's good to have set in place. For many students, some additional resources to catch up from missed days can really be helpful. So whether that's a little bit of extra time with the teacher, just going over what was missed, maybe some handouts from the classes that were missed, or even some photocopied notes from a friend, as well as being excused from work that was maybe not essential, just to help reduce the stress of missing school, because it can already be stressful when students have to miss school for different reasons. And then the added stress of then trying to catch up to work can be a lot. So catching up in a reasonable manner is something that we would hope that the teachers can support. If there has been a stretch of school that has been missed, sometimes families will look at some tutoring or peer study to help catch up. And there are, of course, always alternate learning pathways that may be best suited for some children who might not fit best into mainstream. So something to keep in mind. And again, this will, of course, vary across Canada and worldwide. Moving on for some test considerations, and this will change obviously throughout the years as well, from the younger years up into the senior years. So sometimes these can be some nice things to chat with the teachers about, potentially asking for additional time for a written exam, so that can accommodate for some little breaks throughout writing so that it is not as painful for students, especially if they're having wrist or hand arthritis. Potentially using a laptop may be feasible for some students, and there is not necessarily one that's better or worse when it comes to typing versus writing, but whatever is the student's preference in this domain, especially when it comes to sitting exams. Considering the time of day is also really important. So the afternoon potentially is better if a child is having morning stiffness and struggling to get going in the mornings, whereas potentially if fatigue is more of an issue, maybe they are best to sit the exams in the morning. So I think, again, as Colleen pointed out, kind of getting a sense of when the exams will be coming up so that these things can be put into place earlier rather than later to reduce that stress. Something else to think about with the exams is pain and concentration, because we know that pain can impact concentration. So what can we do to mitigate that? So for a start, bringing in any strategies we have to help manage the pain. So whether that's the medication, things such as access to maybe ice or heat packs, being able to regularly take movement breaks throughout the exam to help manage that pain or that gelling sensation from sitting too long and becoming stiff. And then if concentration is a concern, maybe that means even sitting the exam in a quiet space to reduce the distractions of a standard classroom. And there may be times as well that exams need to be rescheduled if that happens to coincide with the time of a flare and they're not able to attend school, or they have required medical appointments. So I think the key here is just reaching out to the school early, being in touch, and trying not to leave things to the last minute to help reduce that stress for students. And the final thing that I will touch on this evening are just around some social and emotional supports, because we know arthritis, lupus, and other rheumatic diseases affect not only physical health, but can also take a toll on mental health. Tapping into available supports can help to either boost or maintain a good mental health for these students. So just some available supports that may be a consideration for your child and family. Maybe things like a school-based support, the guidance counselor, using these to your advantage to help support your child. Peer support programs, such as even the Cassie and Friends Youth Mentorship Program, can be a wonderful support for students to connect with others who are going through similar situations and can share some really valuable insights. Your care team, you may have access to a psychologist, depending where you are, social worker, and allied health that can help to support around this front as well. There are camps across Canada and I hope internationally as well, that are specific for children with arthritis and rheumatic diseases. And these can be wonderful ways for children to connect from a friendship level, but also to discuss these things that may come up and share their own strategies for how they help to navigate some of these issues. Just checking in with your child and ensuring a good balance, of course, is so helpful. So balancing out their school demands with ensuring physical activity when possible, social connections, and of course, sleep. So this is a big key. And when it comes to looking after our good mental health, is just finding the sweet spot with that balance. There are such a range of wonderful online resources out there for children, teens, and parents when it comes to mental health. Some ones that we commonly refer to in BC that you may be interested in taking a look at are the Kelty Mental Health website and the Foundry website as some starting points among many out there. So again, just a brief pause here. If there's anything that you would like to jot down when it comes to learning supports, test accommodations, and social and or emotional supports before I hand over to Joanne.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. That was amazing. Hello, everyone. I'm going to continue on now by discussing pacing and energy or symptom management. There are some things to consider when thinking about where you are at in your journey. And some people may have heard of the stoplight analogy before, and we'll be using that today. In newly diagnosed or flaring states, we're at the red light. We want to make sure that we keep big, actively inflamed joints moving, but always respecting the pain and never pushing beyond the pain. Self-pacing is key, and the majority of kids, starting right with the little ones in kindergarten, naturally tend to be good at self-pacing. And what I mean by that is taking breaks and taking rests and slowing down when their body needs it. The key is to balance the rest with low intensity and, if necessary, low impact activities. For example, if the knee, hip, or ankle are inflamed, avoiding those pounding activities, lots of running and jumping from a height. An example of some symptom management strategies would be having access to a hot pack and or a place to rest when needed, and not being pushed when that rest is needed and they're trying to self-pace themselves or if they're in pain. Children with active inflammation in their body often feel extra fatigued, as Sarah had mentioned as well, and can have a low appetite, which can also impact their participation and their ability to concentrate in class. Mornings can be extra hard. Sorry if it's a bit repetitive. Mornings can be extra hard due to the stiffness and or fatigue. So understanding from the teacher in school that there may be late arrivals for younger kids, and when possible with the older students, having a morning spare may be necessary. Symptom symptoms are often referred with the stiffness, pain, fatigue, even the swelling of some joints are just not obvious. And that's really what makes it extra important to have that open communication line with your teacher and the school. Cassie and friends have developed these amazing resources online that you can find to help prepare for these conversations with your school and with your teachers and coaches, such as a checklist and self-management plan template. And there's also letter templates for elementary school and for middle high school students that are great places to start. As the inflammation comes better under control, thanks, Sarah, we approach the yellow light. We can start to introduce some gentle stretching, gradually increasing activities, increasing weight bearing. It's important to continue to allow for that self-pacing and reiterate and remember that symptoms can change day to day and even morning to afternoon. Once the inflammation is resolved, just a tip I like to share with families that I work with, and some of you may have heard it, but I think it's a great tip to keep in mind that if there's an increase in joint pain or swelling for more than an hour or two after an activity, then it was either too hard in intensity or too long. So next time, it doesn't mean you can't ever do that activity again, but next time, cut it in half, whether it's less intense or less time, just cut it in half and try again. And it can be a bit of trial and error to figure out what the right intensity or time will be. And again, it might change day to day, but that's sort of a tip I like to share. Next slide. Right, so once the inflammation is resolved, we can kind of think of it like returning from a sport injury, let's say. We're getting to that green light where you want to return to full activities and participation, but in a gradual way. And if you're doing or your child's doing higher level competitive sports or higher intensity activities, it's important to make sure that there are some rest days in there. Speak with your team, your healthcare team, about whether working with a physiotherapist on higher level sports specific training is recommended. If there is some significant joint involvement or muscle inflammation or contractures, they might need to do a little extra training before being ready for full return to sport. And as always, don't forget the importance of a well-balanced diet and adequate sleep, not just at this time, but at all times. Okay, thanks. So let's take a moment, just as we did before, just take a moment and think and write. Consider your unique situation at this moment. Is there anything in relation to pacing and or symptom management that you would like to add to your action plan? Sarah, I think you paced it well. So if you want to continue to the next slide after a little pause, I'll just keep talking. Thanks. Okay. I'd like to introduce you to Reese. This is a picture of her a week or so after receiving knee and ankle joint injections. The message from mom that accompanied the picture read, "She was full of energy right away. This time it did take a few more days, which was surprising, but these were taken yesterday at a soccer tournament where she stopped a zillion shots, got 2 shutouts, and MVP." So this is our ultimate goal: full participation in the activities that the kids love to do. We know that kids with JIA, even when in remission, tend to be less active than kids their age. So it's very important to find activities that they really enjoy. As always, we strongly support open communication with our coaches and teachers in school. And there are lots of creative ways to keep kids engaged with their friends and activities and in their activities, even when their arthritis is not well controlled. And these are just a few examples, like using a beach ball instead of a basketball or volleyball, having to walk around the gym instead of run laps. If they're learning a sport, maybe focusing on a specific skill of that sport rather than all skills required for that sport. And if necessary, you can talk to your team and perhaps have an individual program that's developed by your PT or OT that they carry it on their own, either on their own or with an adult like an education assistant, or some of the kids that I've worked with have had friends from their class that become their workout buddy and do these specific stretches and strengthening exercises with them separately during gym class. Next, I'd like to introduce Maya. She was diagnosed with JIA at a very young age and joined competitive gymnastics at the age of 9. These are a few quotes that I wanted to share with you from a write-up she did for our SickKids newsletter. I began competitive gymnastics when I was 9, or during the first few years. Sorry, I have a thing, but in my way, arthritic pain and swelling in my knees. I remember it was hard to walk, let alone jump and tumble. I received a couple cortisone injections in my knee that helped relieve the pain. I was able to continue training because of my support system and sheer passion for gymnastics. As I grew up, I not only learned to manage the pain of my arthritis, but also the pain of gymnastics-related injuries. My coach helped me understand that fear does not define your abilities. My fear was the only thing limiting me from achieving greatness. It is important not to compare yourself to others. Remember, your journey is unique to you. And the mindset that keeps me going is to treat each setback as a lesson to learn from. So, the main points for me that really stand out are the importance of strong support systems. And all of you being here tonight show that you are there. You're the support system and you're part of it. We're all part of a team together. Finding an activity that the child has a passion for, learning to listen to our bodies, being kind to yourself and your unique journey, and just sheer perseverance. Next slide. Okay, so some other points I wanted to highlight regarding sports and gym are not all kids experience or voice complaints of pain. So sometimes you have to do a little detective work and just look for those changes in their movement. There's an increased risk of injury during flare, and there's a lot of reasons for this. Muscles can be inhibited from firing or turning on, making it harder to stabilize and protect your joints. Ligaments and tendons can become weak with prolonged inflammation, making them more at risk of injury. And pain and restricted movement in inflamed joints can also change the way we move, increasing the risk of injury. It can be challenging to discern pain from arthritis from other types of pain. In general, arthritis pain will be present every day to some degree, regardless of activity, and usually worse in the mornings with some associated stiffness. If there's a new pain associated with starting a sport or activity, wait and see if the pain stays or goes away. For any pain that stays for a period of time after the activity, it is worth a review with your doctor or your physiotherapist or occupational therapist. And this may be a simple email or a telephone call with them. Use your orthotics or splints if they've been prescribed, and have good supportive footwear. So by that, I mean that you have some adequate cushioning, a bit of arch support, a firm heel cup. So that's the part that holds onto your heel, keeping your heel in a nice neutral position, and that they're not able to be twisted easily like a rag. So some people call that torsion control. Okay. Okay. So next slide. We're just going to take another minute or two, and you can jot down any sort of action plan notes specific to gym or sports participation, or anything that you weren't able to complete or thoughts you weren't able to complete, or notes from this presentation. And that's where I'm going to end off.
Thank you very much, Joanne and Sarah. Now, I would just invite the attendees to take a minute and gather your thoughts. And if you have questions, please do put them into the question and answer box. And I will start looking at those and feeding them to our speakers. Answers in just a minute here. So our first question is, do you have any advice for kids just starting in kindergarten? Any suggestions on the transition from daycare to real, quote unquote, real school? And I believe that, Colleen has already touched on this a little bit, but perhaps, Colleen, would you like to weigh in on that?
Sure. You can hear me okay?
I sure can. Yep.
Great. Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that, and I think about me being in an elementary school right now with a number of our kindergarten parents coming in. It's a really honestly, I think it's a bit scary because you're now having to do it's a steep learning curve if everything goes as planned. Much more challenging when you have, worries about your own child, or different things that you have to sort of figure out in a day. The things that moving from daycare to kindergarten that I see for kids, and the things that you want to think about and how that would impact your own child is that they just have that really extended day, and it's the whole sort of goal of it is to create that structured day. And if you have a child, like for example with Kaden, where she might have a sore knee for a little bit of the morning, she's not going to be able to follow that structure necessarily, so some accommodations have to be made in that way. So just recognizing the changes would be the length of the day, and that structure. The things that I've seen people make choices around is just, do we have to go all day to start? You can slow it down. You can have your own gradual entry. There is a structured gradual entry, but you can have your own gradual entry. Um, Clearly, really, and the materials that Cassie and Friends has on their website to help you articulate that information they're fantastic. And that information is power, is that once you've provided that information, and it kind of sits as that third point for that conversation with a teacher. We're talking about this document here, and these are the points, whereas it's, I'm not trying to create an issue or make things challenging. I just, here's what the facts are, here's the reality, and here's what we need. And I will always say, as a parent, you're the advocate for your child. And, you know, I've had to, in my role as a principal, I have to face lots of fierce advocates for their child. And sometimes, it's, it might be not quite coming from the right place, but to be honest, um, I always feel like, any time that I have a parent that is angry, it usually comes from fear. They just want the best for their kid. And when we have a lot of emotion wrapped up, it's sometimes hard for us to settle that through. But you know, partnership is a really important piece. So lots of conversation and communication and getting to know each other is a really important part.
Thank you. And I would imagine early communication too.
Yeah, for sure. Early on. Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, another question here is, how can we help manage pain in school, especially when it comes to medication side effects and ensuring they have rest time? I'm not sure. Maybe that might be a Colleen question as well, from an administrative perspective, since we don't have a nurse or a physician here to answer that.
Well, I mean, it is an accommodation piece, right? Like, what you're asking for is an accommodation for your child, given that they have specific needs around their ability to learn. And I think in how we sort of play that out and clarify in the conversation what we need, I think the word accommodations is a really important one. And I think, um, I'm just trying to think through the most. And also, there is a process. Like, if you feel like you've spoken to the teacher, and you have a good rapport, and then that's who you're going to communicate with. When you would come to the administrator, like me, is maybe you're feeling like you weren't quite heard, that maybe there are a few more accommodations, or maybe you have questions about formalizing. some of these accommodations, and that's when you would be connecting your doctor with the school. And each district would have their own ways of doing that, but that would probably be another step. And that's when you would be accessing a bigger team, the learning services team, or however it's phrased it in your building. Yeah.
Thank you. Next question. Are you aware of any new text-to-speech software or similar coming out to help make writing, either for those with JIA active, to help making writing easier for those with active JIA in their hands? And I think, Sarah, you already spoke to this a little bit, but could you expand on it a little bit more, maybe?
Yeah, thanks, Heather. And there is such a range of dictation software out there right now. And I think access will probably depend a little bit to school by school, because each school may have access to different software that you can then use, because some of them do come with a price tag, but there are also a number that are available for free as well. One of the biggest dictation software is Dragon speech recognition, which is widely used across schools and also universities. So this could be a nice one to look at if your student or teenager is interested in using some dictation software. There are other versions that can be used and accessed quite easily. Android, for example, has their software or app, Gboard, I believe it's called, which can be a really good platform, as well as the app that's just called Dictation. So these can be simple ways, especially if your student does have a phone or a smartphone that they are using for any of their schoolwork. This can be an easy way of using that, or on any of their devices. But there is such a range out there, and more are obviously coming out all of the time. So it's an exciting and evolving area, but something to talk to your team with, and also look at access to these as well, so that you won't be out of pocket if this is something that your student might be interested in.
Thank you. And to make sure it's compatible with other things that they're doing as well. Great. Thank you. Could you please discuss the research and strategies regarding the overlap between mental health, anxiety, and rheumatic disease? Goodness, I think that could almost be anyone. Maybe Sarah, would you like to take a stab at that?
Yes, I'd love to start off with this one. This is
Okay,
something that
perfect.
I think I'm quite passionate about, because it's so important that we support our mental health for our students with JAA and other rheumatic diseases like lupus, or children who may have fever syndromes as well. So I think from the research that is out there, and this is a space where more and more research is coming out, but we know that children with JIA do experience higher rates of mental health complaints. So this may be things like depression or anxiety, at a higher rate than their healthy peers, and at a similar rate to other chronic health diseases. So this is an area that we really need to put resources in and to talk about. So that can be talking about from parents, and also from our teams as well. We need to be bringing this up in consults as well. So it's on us as well as care providers to be bringing this up and checking in how the students are doing from a mental health point of view as well. And then, because we know it is a concern, we then need to be bringing up and doing potentially some screening measures, and then providing access to some of those resources that I went over. So whether that's the school guidance counselor, access to a counselor in the community, potentially other mental health referrals if that is warranted as well as just being mindful of ensuring balance, things like physical activity, sleep, ensuring all of these healthy habits, because it's such a big part of maintaining good mental health when managing a chronic disease as well, which is an added stress to what many students are already have a high level of stress, especially as the years go on. So having a chronic health condition can make that even more challenging. So definitely an area that warrants a lot of attention and support. And even when things are going well, just keeping on checking in so that we're maintaining that good mental health, because it can change, over the years and over a short period of time as well. I'm sure others may have something to add.
Does anyone have anything else to add? Yeah, it's such an important aspect of just everyday life too, and there are, once you have some of those mental health skills, it's important to practice them for when you need them, right? Not just to have them when you're in a stressful situation. Thank you, Sarah. How can kids advocate for themselves when parents aren't there, especially when it comes to symptom management? I know, Colleen, you did speak to that already about your own situation with Caden. Did you have anything else you wanted to share?
I don't think I have anything else really, but just students or kids, they don't always have the words. And so we have to empower them with the right words. And I think a lot I even do that with when I'm working with kids here at my job every day. What is it that you're trying to say? Tell me what it is, so I say it back. We practice what you're going to say. And it really is empowering for them, in many different ways of life. And I think the other piece is, when your child is having to say something at school, it might be worth, Mom, I had to do this, or I said this. You can always do, a follow up, right? Is this, what did you hear from her? How did she explain that? And did you have any other questions to me? Just to kind of, as that backup person, when they are trying to self advocate. Then the other layer of that is finding out what was, are they coming home to tell you that they told their teacher that they self-advocated? I mean, those aren't even kid words. Mom, today I self-advocated. And you might not ever know when they need to do that. So that open dialogue between the two of you, and know that as a mom of a 16-year-old, that comes and goes when they really want to share their day with you or not, right? So again, that staying in touch with the teacher as well, around that is a good idea.
Thank you.
Yeah, I might just add and I think it also overlaps with the first couple questions too. The idea of developing strategy or a management plan as a team from the beginning of the school year. So that if and having the child be an active part of the team to develop that plan. So if the mornings are going to be hard, or there's some extra stiffness or pain, like with Cadence, and knowing that she's going to have extra pain and stiffness until 11 o'clock. Having specific things that the child knows is available for them, like a hot pack at the office, or a quiet space where they can go for a rest and have time to themselves. And having that discussion and having the child be part of it, even from the beginning, might help them feel safe to go to their teacher and to say that they need their hot pack or whatever they might need at that time, or that rest. And some kindergarten classes are set up in different ways, I think, depending on the school board. But if there's stations set up that the kids can rotate around, making sure one of those stations is a quiet area with bean bags and chairs and different options for sitting and resting, because sometimes getting down to the floor, even for a 4-year-old, can be really hard to get down there and back up again. So I think sending that email in September and making a plan as a team and making the child part of it might help empower them.
Thanks so much.
Sorry, can I also
okay,
add?
Of course.
Sorry,
No,
I
no.
think one of the things that's been really nice throughout my career is as I have seen a much and bigger embrace of what we can do in the classroom to support students with different needs, and that social emotional regulation or needs. And so, just within, probably the work that I've and this, I've talked to different districts as well. So I wouldn't just speak for my own district, but I would say, like, collectively British Columbia has done a lot better in terms of, we do have those quiet spaces, and classrooms might have a soft spot that wasn't there honestly, it wasn't there when I started teaching. So I think there's a shift that's pretty positive. So asking for that. So do you have a quiet corner or a soft seating? Those are some, we call it soft seating or maybe something else, but that's not unheard of. You're not asking for anything unheard of. It's a common practice, and hopefully you get to hear what your child needs.
Thank you. How can we best communicate the need for accommodations, such as alternate test taking days for even mornings versus afternoon, due to being more sore in the mornings? Anyone? Maybe Sarah?
Yes, and without sounding too repetitious here, but I think it again comes back to that early communication. So having that either the email to the school, using the school templates that are on the Cassie and Friends website, or your care team can also help to provide a letter to school to have these accommodations formally written. So then they can be discussed early and in place so that when the time of the test does come up, they can be then approached with plenty of time to have the alternate arrangements set in place. So I think early in the year and in writing.
Which is better, typing versus writing? Sarah, since we have you.
Yes, I think there is not one definitive answer here. So this will depend child to child and depending on their symptoms. And for them, it may even depend day to day or class to class. Some students will mention to me when I'm chatting to them about this in clinic that they might find that typing is less painful for them if they are having potentially wrist or hand symptoms, that they can manage typing a little bit easier than writing, maybe type for a longer period of time as well. But then there might be times where they feel like they will remember information better if they are handwriting it. So they might choose to write for short periods of times. And then there comes to things like maths, which are just really challenging to do often on a computer or a laptop. So that then they will choose to do writing. So often a mix can work really nicely. Same for exams. Some students will prefer to sit some exams using a laptop, but others feel like they prefer to get information down when they are handwriting, but perhaps they just need a little extra time with that. So again, having that accommodation in place early so that they can have extra time with the exams to accommodate those mini breaks throughout the writing, whatever that might look like for the student. So in summary, yes, not one necessarily over the other, but often a combination can work nicely.
I've also, just to add to that, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Some exams and tests that require a lot of typing or a lot of writing, and if it's a real difficulty, I've had some kids have success doing a test orally. So sitting down with the teacher and answering the questions orally when the typing or writing, both of them are just too difficult.
Thank you. How do I tell the school to try and distract our kid from their pain before calling you to pick them up? Am I saying that correctly? Sorry. So I guess how do I communicate with the school to try to distract my child around their pain before they call for me to come and pick them up? I think that's the question. Colleen, do you have any suggestions there?
It sounds like a very specific situation question. So, there might be further conversation in a different venue, but my wonders with that is what are the distractions that you use at home that are successful, and does the teacher have access to a collection of distractions that will work at school within a classroom, kind of a thing. So I guess it would be my wonder would be, is that teacher armed with the tools to help in that situation? And then in a specific maybe situation, I might be, there might be kind of a leveling of it, like, okay, so this is what we use at level, so we tried this, and then we tried this, and then we tried this. So now we do call home, because we kind of did go through all of our steps, just so that, you know, you feel like there was some, you know, there was some trying, and you know, maybe it would be more successful if they, you know, those layers were filled with specific tools that worked. So just it's actually a question that begs more questions.
Right, right. But a bit of a process there.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
expect it. Yeah. Great. Thank you. What do you do with nosy peers? Like when I need to use the elevator and wait for school staff. Thank you, Leila, as well. I guess maybe, I'm not sure anyone could answer that question. Does anyone want to jump in?
I kind of wish my daughter was here. She'd probably be the best to answer that question, because, you know, those lived experiences, and just giving whoever is asking that question the chance to ask other kids and what they've sort of tried to use to navigate it. I mean, you're visibly getting into an elevator. You kind of have to, best case scenario is you just own it. It's hard not to be seen doing that. So yeah, it's tough when I think, yeah, your best strategy would just be to own it. I need to use it, on your way. So, but it's not that easy.
Right. And how about maybe getting permission for a friend to come with you? You know, is that maybe kind of encourages your own sense of courage, maybe too.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you. My daughter in elementary with arthritis would like to know, is it okay to use a pencil grip even if I don't have arthritis in my hands? Sarah, I think you were talking about pencil grips earlier. So
And yes, it can definitely be okay. There are many students out there who can benefit from using a pencil grip to help with their graphs when they're writing. And this is not only for students who have arthritis. And there's so many different types of pencil grips out there, so that can be a little bit overwhelming and hard to know which one is best for you. So if you do have access to an OT in your clinic, this could be something that you could chat with them about, and they could help you choose the right one. Otherwise, it's totally okay to do a trial and error too, to see what works best for your grasp, and what you feel like you can produce your neatest writing with to help with your with holding your pencil. So absolutely, it's okay.
you. How do I go about accessing a school district provided OT? Sarah, I will ask you that question maybe, or I think it might be a Colleen question as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then I'm sure, Colleen, you can add to this, because this is something, I guess, that will differ province to province and across the worldwide as well. But typically the referral for a school-based OT will come from the school itself. But bearing in mind that OT services provided in schools in BC are somewhat limited and provided on a more consult basis. And there is a priority screening for the referral process. So children who potentially have higher level medical needs and may need OT support around things such as feeding, seating, positioning in wheelchairs, for example, fine motor and sensory processing regulation difficulties, are more on the top tier. So some of the students we see in our clinic may be eligible, but there are some that may not be eligible for more regular OT services in the school. So something to chat with your school about if you think that your child may be eligible for this, but it can be a somewhat of a tricky process, from my understanding in BC anyway, to have that more regular input in the school setting.
Joanne, do you have, sorry, Colleen too, but Joanne, do you have any comments maybe about Toronto or Ontario?
Yeah, it sounds very similar. The request comes from the school, not from us. We can definitely support and work with the school to provide any rationale or extra rationale they need for requesting the OT or PT support in the school. In the past, the Arthritis Society used to help with some school supports and educations and assessments as well. I don't know the last time that's been tried, but they were a great help in the past as well. Yeah, it really varies. Thanks, Daniela. Sorry, Colleen, come back.
No, I do just agree. Everything, yeah, it's varied, and just go and talk to your school district or your school to find out the information. Yeah.
And I have one final question here. If anyone has any last questions they'd like to add in the question and answer box, please do. The question is, what do you do with kids who are verbally teasing you when you go to appointments or are late for school and call you names? I think anyone could weigh in on that, but Colleen, do you have any comments?
Yeah, you have to report that to an adult to get you help. And I don't, depending on your age, but and I'm sorry that that's happening to you, because that isn't very nice and that doesn't help at all. But sometimes in a situation like that, you need an adult to help you have that conversation with that person about the impact that they're having on you, right? Because what is missing there is the person that's doing that doesn't understand, and they don't have an they don't know, right? And quite often when we sit down and have maybe an adult have a conversation with that person, or another, if it's more than one, and you get a chance to say that impact, this is how it feels when you do this, it can really have a change. So I hope that you can have somebody that you can share that with, and I'm sorry. Yeah.
Are there any final questions that anyone would like to add? I think I had one comment myself, Jen, before you jump in. In my current role, I have a great privilege of working in a young adults transition clinic, where our patients are transitioning from pediatric care into adult care. And so I'm part of that team of allied health and rheumatologists who receive that group of young patients from peds and moving into adult care. And so I get to see actually some of the kids I knew when they were very little, some who had a lot of really terrible arthritis and a lot of struggles in school and struggles with physical sports. And just it's been such a real delight to see them grow into these young adults who are off on various adventures in post-secondary world. So just as a word of encouragement, because I remember working on the PEDS program and having those conversations with families and with students, and there are a lot of challenges and lots of successes as well. So that's just one little encouragement I wanted to share as well. Over to you, Jen.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Wilson. I'm the Executive Director of Cassie and Friends, and I just have a few words to end this amazing webinar tonight. First of all, I just want to thank our panelists so very much, Joanne and Sarah, for providing the perspective from healthcare, as well as Heather for being an incredible MC, Colleen for your expertise as both a parent and an educator as well. This has been a really amazing webinar in terms of just highlighting all of the ways that a community can come together to support kids to really thrive and not just get the chance to be kids or be teens, but to really, achieve their goals and to be well supported in their learning and social journeys. And I heard over and over, action and planning and partnership and all these pieces coming together. And I really hope that you find Cassie and Friends can be a community where you can find all those pieces together, because one of the things that I also heard was that understanding about juvenile arthritis and rheumatic diseases is a big piece of this puzzle. So we're working very hard to raise awareness across Canada to every Canadian about what juvenile arthritis or a rheumatic disease like fever syndromes or lupus, etc., means for kids, so that teachers are also well informed and classmates are well informed. And I think that's one thing that we can all really work on together. On the screen, I just want to say a quick thank you to our sponsors. Nicola Wealth Management, AbbVie, Amgen, and Sobi play a critical role in helping to provide programming like this. I think we are in our 4th season of virtual education, and all of these resources have come together into Classroom, which is on the Cassie and Friends website at cassieandfriends.ca. And there you can find an incredible wealth of information on every aspect of the juvenile arthritis and other rheumatic disease journey. So I really encourage you to take a look through, and I hope that school action plan is a tool that you'll be able to use year after year, along with the letters we have for teacher communication and also symptom management planning for school, accommodation lists, etc. But we also have information on nutrition and sleep and mental health, which have been a major focus of ours this year as well. If we just go to the next slide. The other thing that I heard over and over is connection. And I think there's some things, school issues we talked about, that parents can really help other parents with. And those are the other experts in the room, is just sharing tips and things you've tried. And the Juvenile Arthritis Canada Facebook group is managed by Cassie and Friends, and an excellent place to connect with parents across Canada who really understand and who can sometimes provide that emotional support that we need as parents, to quell our own anxiety and fears and worries. It can be really hard to allow our kids to be independent in the school setting, or to help them grow their independent self-advocacy or speaking up, or whatever word you want to use. But this Canadian Juvenile Arthritis Group is an amazing, amazing resource where you can connect with other parents who really understand. And in the chat, we have mentioned the youth mentorship program a few times, and I really encourage youth to think of that as a great resource. It's available anytime. Youth can reach out, and it doesn't have to be an ongoing mentorship, formal relationship. It can be, I'm having a tough time at school and just wanting to speak to another youth. And these are amazing young adults who are really caring, who have their own stories to share, and who have also been trained as youth mentors. So I encourage you to use that resource as well. Next slide. And lastly, just, we are here for you at Cassie and Friends all of the time. We have a resource, our website resources, but also feel free to email us at info@cassieandfriends.ca. Follow us on social media. We're always putting out a ton of events and content there. Come out to one of our run walks. Our next webinar is on gymming with JA for those with any kid who is really involved in sport or interested in working out, which is quite popular right now. It's going to be an excellent session. Our team, Cassie and Friends, run walk events across Canada. We are headed to Windsor, London, and Toronto next, so you can find that information on our website as well. And we really look forward to connecting with everyone in person. We are right now planning a Family Day conference event in Toronto, and then look forward to bring that in-person programming across Canada. And I think that wraps up our session for today. So thank you to everyone who attended. Just as a last reminder, Cassie and Friends is a national charity, and any and all support from families or friends or businesses helps us be there for kids and families in a really sustainable, enduring, and vibrant way. And we really look forward to meeting everyone, connecting with you, and please do let us know how else we can help. So thank you very much, and I wish everyone a good night. And thank you again to all of our panelists.